This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street.
Well, welcome aboard, folks. Dr. Charles Parker here one more time, and we are very privileged today to have another individual who is very focused on brain function. We just published one this morning on Hemingway's brain, and I was talking to Debbie Hampton about it. Welcome, Debbie. Thank you for coming on board.
Thank you, Charles. Glad to be here.
And we're going to introduce Debbie in just a second, but the big thing right off the bat is that Debbie is going to talk about brain health, brain injury, her own experience of having had brain injury, and we're going to get deeply into it. We think it's a very interesting topic, and I think it's a very optimistic, affirmative topic, and we can think out what to do with it, and Debbie's a good example of things we can do about it. But before we get started, let me just mention a couple of things about our two new sponsors. You listeners already know how much we love the reality of data here at CBJ, and today we're welcoming our clinical friend and our new sponsor partner, Direct Health Access Laboratory. With over 3 million studies, they are deep leaders of experience with the big picture of measuring, for example, methylation, cryptopyrrole, and copper challenges, all of which affect brain function. Yes, global service with a molecular focus. Stay tuned. We'll talk more about them in a minute. And then you already also know that we love the reality of good care and what can be done. We appreciate detailed improvements of mind care. And today we're pleased to welcome another sponsor and partner with a deep interest in fresh options to address the complexity of adolescent treatment failure nationally and internationally. For 80 years, the nonprofit Barry Robinson Center teams in Norfolk, Virginia provide residential care on an evolved family, interpersonal, and global level. They are built TRICARE friendly. More in a moment. So with that, we're going to introduce our colleague and guest, Debbie Hampton. And Debbie is a very experienced person. She has a number of irons in the fire, so to speak. She has recovered from decades of unhealthy thinking and depression. She had a suicide attempt and a resulting brain injury. And she's become an inspirational and educational writer on brain, psychological, emotional, and mental health issues for nothing less than the Huffington Post. She also writes for Mind, Body, Green, and more. On her website, The Best Brain Possible, Debbie shares how she rebuilt her brain and life to find joy and actually thrive with the experience. She wants you to know that she can help you out too, and we're going to be talking about that. You can quickly learn about the steps to a better you in her book, Beat Depression and Anxiety by Changing Your Brain with Simple Practices, easy to implement in your own daily life. And if you improve your brain, you can certainly improve your life. So welcome, Debbie. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are. You have a delightful, fresh accent. I know it's going to be so much fun talking to you. So where are you located right now, and what are you doing?
I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is in the central part of the state. And I consider myself a writer, an online marketer, and brain health educator.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I didn't know you were in Greensboro. My uncle was Stuart Maynard. He was at Guilford College.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he was the baseball, football coach. I guess it was only baseball. I don't think they had football there, but he was a great guy. Since passed away, and we go down. My aunt still lives down there, so we love that part of the country. So, how has it been writing for the Huffington Post? What kind of schedule do they have you on? What do they do? What's the reality of that experience?
Well, all of us contributors to the Huffington Post set our own schedules and just post when we want to. Mm-hmm. They don't make us do anything.
They don't crack the whip on you, huh?
No.
So let's get down to what you think. Well, first of all, let's tell you a little bit about your life and what actually happened to you. So it sounds like you had a very, very big tragedy there. You were emotionally beat up on some level. We don't need to get into the personal part of the story, but you did try to harm yourself. Was it brain injury following that suicide attempt, or what actually happened to you on a personal level?
Yes, I sustained the brain injury from the suicide attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I overdosed on, 90-some drugs. And I'm talking sleeping pills, tranquilizers, muscle relaxers, those kind of things. And put myself in a coma for a week. And also had like septic shock, other complications, pneumonia. And I did come out of the coma about 7 days later. And when I woke, I couldn't speak. I had my hands trembled constantly. I had no memory. I had very shaky balance. I couldn't control my bladder. I mean, I was back to very much the reptilian brain, or the basic brain processes, just staying alive. So after that, over the years, I had to rebuild my life and my brain.
So how did you decide to do that, and how did you get a schedule together to do something like that? Because one of the things we know so often in individuals with brain injury, number one, frequently they deny it. It's like, I'm okay, it's not a problem. Then if they deny it, that prefrontal cortex, that executive function, is so compromised that they can't get it together to just do some routine, let's stay on a program thing. So what happened with that?
Well, I was severely impaired at first, and I was not in any condition to help myself. And about 6 months afterwards, I had a near drowning experience.
Oh my gosh.
And I really, really almost drowned. And I fought really hard to save myself. And it wasn't until about a month after the incident, I thought, wait a minute, I tried to kill myself 6 months ago. But when presented with a life or death situation, I fought really hard to survive. Why did I do that? What is going on?
Yes.
And from that experience, I realized that I was making myself miserable. And this may not be the case for everybody that's depressed, but it was the case for me. That I was replaying all the pain of the past and all the bad events over and over. And I was torturing myself when my essence was to live. My innate instinct was to fight to survive. So after that experience, I realized that I did want to live, and I started acting like it. And I read this book by Norman Deutsch called The Brain That Changes Itself. And the book is full of real stories about people born with half a brain, or that had severe brain injuries, or a stroke, or something else, and how they overcame having half a brain, or reprogrammed the brain they did have to regain normal functionality. And after reading that, I thought, here is a recipe for how to rebuild my brain. Every brain is different, and every brain injury is different. But it introduced me to neuroplasticity, which is basically that what you experience, your behavior, your thoughts, your feelings, physically change the form and the function of your brain. And a lot of this happens unknowingly. I mean, it happens automatically. But if you want to improve your brain and direct it repairing and growing in a certain way, you can harness neuroplasticity to encourage your brain to grow and repair. And that's what I did for years. But it worked.
So that book turned you around. I'm very familiar with that book. It's a real landmark book. We're going to have it, folks, in the show notes to reference it. But he did a tremendous job in really taking some excellent examples of severely impaired individuals with brain injury that actually was so bad that it had motor problems with arms and legs. And he said, look, we're just going to do what we have to do to rebuild the brain. And some surprising results came up when people just kept practicing what they wanted to practice. They just kept going at it and going at it. And pretty soon things started happening. I mean, you handle yourself very well for a kind of serious brain injury like that. You're doing a great job.
Well, thanks. It took years and a lot of alternative therapies.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about those. So what did you do? Let's share a little bit of that with the audience if we can. When we say neuroplasticity, what kind of specific things would a person do to rebuild their brain who'd had brain injury?
Well, Charles, it used to be believed until fairly recently, like a decade ago, that your brain was only capable of change, remarkable change, in a few critical periods in childhood. And Dr. Michael Merzenich did research that proved the brain reorganizes and grows all throughout your life. From birth to death, your brain is changing. Now, it does so easier in those childhood explosive growth periods, which is why it's easier to learn an instrument or a different language when you're younger. But it can and does when you're older. It's more difficult, but you can also create conditions that are conducive to encourage neuroplasticity. For instance, one is exercise. Exercise is like miracle grow for your brain. It's the number one thing to promote neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells. Meditate, sleep, challenging your brain, all these things. I've got a post on my website about how to grow the brain. And it lists all these things and more on there that you can specifically do to encourage your brain to grow. So I set about every day doing cardio exercise, at least an hour every day for years. I ran, I swam, I went to the Y and did the elliptical. Because the brain injury severed the connections in my brain, I had to re-establish those connections. And by physically, repetitively doing the movements required to, say, do an elliptical or swim, it re-established those connections in my brain. Now, it doesn't happen quickly, and it needs consistent repetition. This is what is required for neuroplasticity to take place in the adult brain. But it will happen. And I also took supplements, cleaned up my diet, ate a lot of omega-3s, meditation grows and changes your brain as well. I did brain training. I made sure I got a lot of sleep. I love my sleep. And sleep is probably the best I think it's actually more essential to your brain than exercise.
Well, I was interested. Let me interrupt for just a second, because I think one of the things that is often confused, and I'm so glad you made that clarification, because as I was listening to you, I was going to even asked the question earlier, but I wanted to underline it and put an exclamation point on it. The type of exercise that you're talking about is aerobic exercise. And what happens is going in and weightlifting is helpful, but what you're saying is really intense aerobic, get your heart rate up, get your oxygen running through yourself, and really do the aerobic exercise piece. Is that right?
Well, yeah, Dr. Parker, that is optimal, of course, but there have been studies that have shown that even weightlifting or like simply walking has benefits.
Oh, good.
So I don't want to discourage anybody from doing anything.
Oh, good point.
Everything has its benefits.
Mm-hmm.
But I was specifically trying to repair a very injured brain. So it would take more than the average that somebody that is just wanting to optimize their brain. I needed to really, really work it.
You had to get that neuroplastic thing cooking. You were not in a situation because you had so much damage, you had to figure out whether you were going to really pull it all together or whether you're just going to do a little bit of it.
Exactly. I did yoga about 3 to 4 times a week, but I didn't even count that as exercise. I still had to have my cardio every day.
So that yoga, was it relaxing yoga, or was it hot yoga, or what kind of yoga were you doing?
I do hot yoga. I'm surprised that you even know about it. But yeah, I do hot yoga. And actually, I think that was very instrumental in helping me recover because I ingested so many toxins. I actually sweated them out.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me detoxify. Plus, it really helped me regain my balance and my core strength and proprioception, my spatial awareness. I mean, when I first started, I couldn't even balance on one leg. And now, I mean, I've been doing it 4 times a week for probably 7 years. And as a matter of fact, I used to own a studio. I sold that to you.
Did you become a yoga trainer yourself, or did you get that kind of education, or what happened with that?
Well, I did get a certification to do that, but I never did because of my speech and memory issues. And I thought it would take away the enjoyment of actually doing it. I just love doing it.
So then, because you like doing it, you wanted to stay with it as opposed to losing it there. Now we're having, I'm watching you a little bit. Can you hear me? Oh, good. I see you in the camera. It looks, we lost you a little bit there, but you weren't speaking, so nobody knew that except me. But the bottom line, that's really, really interesting. Now, do you want to share with us a little bit in just a moment? I'm going to take a break right now, but when we come back, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the nutritional supplements that you used. And we'd also like to ask the question if you felt that you needed any psychiatric medication as well, if that's not too personal. Those are 2 questions that we're going to ask when we get back in just a moment.
Well, folks, you know as well as I do that psychiatric treatment failure, especially after multiple medication trials and those very, very brief hospitalizations, may prove insufficient to deal at home with the complexity of troubled children and those adolescents from 6 to 17 years old. Improved care, those next mandatory steps, should include a more comprehensive approach to address those multiple levels of challenges, from family to peers to school, diagnostically from defiance to depression, on every level for families, including military families internationally. The Barry Robinson Center's 32-acre open college-like campus in Norfolk, Virginia, provides safety and security and clean, comfortable living. How do we know? We refer folks over there all the time, strongly endorse what they're doing. So for further information, an informed interview, connect at this page, barryrobinson.org/core. Well, you folks already know that here at Core Brain Journal, we're on a mission to introduce you to resources that make significant contributions to the investigation of those predictable mind science applications. Our colleagues at DHA Lab Group provide a real difference with treatment options for people at every level, from first awareness of mind problems to those frustrating times when even well-informed treatment becomes surprisingly unpredictable. For my entire professional life, from psychoanalysis to brain scans, I've searched for, yes, improved predictability. The good news for all of us, from professionals to patients, remarkably effective research offers useful, cost-effective, organic options far beyond guesswork with psychiatric medications alone. DHA lab tests measure unbalanced biomedical details through easily available testing, now available globally for a variety of molecular answers from, for example, methylation, copper, and cryptopyrrole challenges. Check in for more details at dhalab.com core. That's dhalab.com/core.
Well, welcome back, folks. Here we are one more time. We had a little break there, and we appreciate those words from our sponsors. Now we're going to get back to Debbie, and we're going to ask her the question, what were the supplements she was taking? We're going to start with supplements, and then we're going to ask her about meds, too, because goodness knows she said she was depressed, and we wondered whether meds were part of her program, whether they weren't part of her program, and what that whole situation. So let's start with the supplements. She did mention omega-3 fatty acids. And by the way, she's going to say this anyway, but I want to make sure we confirm this. This is not by any means an attempt to recommend specific treatment programs for anybody, but it is to say what Debbie did and what worked for her so that you can begin to think that, hey, some of this may be useful, because there's a lot of controversy going on entirely in the whole brain treatment area. Supplements, meds, what works, what doesn't work, what should you do, not do. So Debbie, please tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think every brain and everybody's needs are very individual. And just like every brain injury is very unique. I have always been pretty much a vegetarian. And as you know, the brain needs protein. So after my injury, I was it was important to me to try to get more protein. Mm-hmm. So I supplemented with protein powder, my omega-3s. I ate a bunch of nuts and seeds to get my protein. And because I was just trying to do anything to help, I took all kinds of brain-specific multivitamins with your Bs and everything else you need. I took acetylcholine. I scoured the internet looking for supplements, and I would try something. If I felt it helped, I would continue, and if I didn't, I wouldn't. Mm-hmm. But I still to this day eat coconut oil by the spoonful, mm-hmm. because it is incredibly good brain food. Mm-hmm. And water, sleep. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Just eating well and not eating all the processed chemicals that are in all the food today, because a lot of those are neurotoxins. And a lot may not be neurotoxins, but they may not affect you well. You need to start paying attention to how things feel on your brain. Maybe something makes you feel foggy.
If they work or if they don't work, it's pretty basic. And acetylcholine, folks, just, Debbie ran by that quickly, but acetylcholine is one of the main memory neurotransmitters in the brain. So a person who has Alzheimer's will take a product that's called an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. And acetylcholinesterase breaks down acetylcholine. So if it's an inhibitor of the product that breaks down acetylcholine, it's going to increase acetylcholine. Now, did you do any acetylcholinesterase inhibitors like, Aricept or any of that sort of thing? You didn't do any meds at all?
I did. I went to a rehabilitation therapist, mm-hmm. and we tried some of the drugs I don't even remember which ones, Ritalin for ADD and HD.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it for one day. I didn't like it at all.
What was the problem with it?
It just ramped me up too much.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't sleep at all. And my sleep was the most important thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I also tried, I forget the name of it, but I tried a couple of drugs that had proven good with Alzheimer's and didn't see any difference. So I quit. But I mean, I am and would encourage anybody to be open to whatever might help. You don't know until you try.
Mm-hmm.
If you just say drugs are bad, then you could be ruling out something that could help you. Or if you don't try to clean your diet, you'll know if it could help or not. It may not, but you don't know until you try. I looked at recovering from the brain injury like a puzzle. And it was up to me to find the pieces and put them together. And you don't know where a piece may be that you need.
Well, you know, one of the things, folks, just to let you know, Debbie's been very kind to provide a PDF for us here at this episode. That's going to be a complimentary download from Debbie's How to Better Your Brain and Life. She's got a direct instruction, her experience, her research, what's worked for her. And so you'll be able to download that down below on the show notes when you get to the episode. This is episode 115. So let's go back and let's ask this other penetrating question. So you were depressed. Did you take antidepressants before all this suicide situation and everything? Did they work? Did they not work? What happened with that?
Yes, I've been taking one antidepressant for about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And life just kept getting harder. I had a brother die of AIDS. I took care of him for 2 years. I had multiple miscarriages. I had a divorce. Mm-hmm. So they might have helped, but as things just kept piling on, they didn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the divorce, matter of fact, probably 6 weeks before the suicide attempt, I started another antidepressant on top of the one I was already on.
Mm-hmm.
And as you may know, suicidal ideation is a symptom or side effect of starting a new antidepressant.
It can be, yes. And sometimes it isn't. You know, it depends on, quite honestly, it depends on whether the other things that are going on with your body, whether you have metabolic impediments, whether there's an issue with your liver, your gut, your immune system dysregulation, because any of the psych meds can just be completely ricochet off your system if your system isn't set up to handle it, which is a thought occurred to me when you were talking about the Ritalin, because we see individuals with brain injury often do well with a stimulant that'll help with their prefrontal cortex. But the characteristic thing about any kind of meds with brain injury, from my limited experience, I mean, we've seen a number of people with brain injury, and we do brain imagery to see the brain injury. That's why I slipped on that one. But the bottom line here is brain injured victims don't do well with medications given at the same level you would give to an ordinary person. They have to be much lower and much more carefully titrated, adjusted in dosage up, because if they're not adjusted correctly, this is what happened to Debbie. She went right out the roof. Very unusual for a person to just go completely out the roof, and it depends on what the dose was on that Ritalin or whatever. So without getting into the details, dosage is very important, and I'm so glad that you have an engaged, comprehensive view of, and you're not limited in your thinking. A variety of different things can work. It just depends on the individual. So then, apropos of that whole thing, did you then not do any antidepressants post-recovery after you began to really get into your own rehab?
I took myself off antidepressants.
You did.
You have to remember, I was brain injured.
Yes.
And did not know that you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I just quit taking them. I didn't titrate down.
Mm-hmm.
I just stopped cold turkey. And thankfully, I didn't have any problem with it.
You're lucky. Yeah.
But I also think it was partly because I was brain injured.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, my experience has been that if you're brain injured, a person is so much more susceptible to these odd reactions. You escaped it. Long distance high five. Good, you did. That's fantastic. But what I see individuals who are brain injured, changing the medication, small amounts, going off of it, going on too quickly, they're much more sensitive and you get really regressive very quickly. So, but that's good. So what you're saying is, hey, Parker, I didn't take any medications at all when I got done with it. I've been really surviving. I'm not having depression now. I've got a good positive outlook. I'm writing for the Huffington Post. And you apparently have had some progress in terms of actually consulting with others on your website. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've just recently added a coaching page. Mm-hmm. And I'm not an accredited professional, but from a peer-to-peer standpoint, I have been through depression and come out of it on the other side. I have experienced anxiety and also currently still have anxiety, and I deal with that. And I've been through a severe brain injury and rehabilitated myself. And unfortunately, I got a lot of the information available you will not get from doctors. You get from other people who've been through it. Mm-hmm. Like I learned about the things that ultimately helped me the most: neurofeedback, acupuncture, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, from other people, not from doctors.
Well, let's take a moment to talk about hyperbaric oxygen, because in the entire 115 podcasts that we've had, no one's really talked about hyperbaric oxygen. Did you use the low-pressure hyperbaric oxygen, or did you get in a full-on chamber? What was the situation? You haven't done it.
I didn't know there was any difference, but I still do it today. I get into chamber. And when I first started, I think I did 10 visits consecutively. Mm-hmm. And the difference was dramatic. And understand, I didn't do this, but understand you can look at brain scans before hyperbaric oxygen and look at them afterwards and see the difference. What hyperbaric oxygen does is you're immersed in pressurized oxygen, which forces oxygen, higher concentration of oxygen into your blood, and it allows it to be in higher concentrations, percentages in your brain and in areas where it wouldn't be otherwise. So hyperbaric oxygen is really good for wounds, healing wounds. My practitioner has seen autistic children recover dramatically. She's seen people that didn't speak start speaking. She's seen people that can move paralyzed limbs. And I did HBOT, it's called, for every week for a year or two.
That's HBOT, H-B-O-T, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And you did that for, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I still do it like every other week because I look at it as maintenance. And I also look at it as my insurance to keep me healthy. I mean, they can't say this when they're advertising hyperbaric oxygen, but I think it helps everything. Anything that's wrong with you, cancer, anything. People that are undergoing chemo do HBOT to help with the chemo. I mean, anything that's wrong with you, more oxygen can help.
So let's break this down a little bit more. Were you in a canvas, in the portable canvas HBOT chamber, or were you in a built, you were in the canvas chamber? You were nodding on that. So they also have solid, good. What were you going to say now?
I go to a private wellness center that has the inflatable capsules, and you actually get in it, and they pressurize it, because believe it or not, unfortunately, HBOT services are not very readily available in the U.S. And even if they are, most of them require a doctor's prescription. I was fortunate enough that I found this one close by that I did not need a prescription. But most are at hospitals or medical centers, and you still need a prescription to do it.
Well, that's true. The prescription ones are usually the higher atmospheres. Now, I'm not deeply experienced with this, but we've had a number of people who have done very well post-brain injury where we've referred them for HBOT, and I'm so glad you brought it up. And like here in town in Norfolk, they have a one that you can push up to, and I'm vague on this, so don't quote me, but it's about 3 atmospheres. And those chambers that you were in, those capsules, those canvas capsules, run it up to, I think, about 1.5 atmospheres. So it's not that much pressure that you don't feel it like some kind of uncomfortable situation. You can go in a chamber and read and relax. I mean, you're just not going to go in there and smoke a cigarette.
Right. I'm meditating now, and I love it. It's my me time.
Well, and then sometimes they pipe in oxygen, and sometimes they just use the actual air that's there, but because they've cranked up the atmospheres, because the pressure is increased, it forces the oxygen into your system more effectively. Were they adding oxygen on you, Deb? How did that work?
They do.
Yeah.
They do. And HBOT has been an approved part of the medical system in other countries for decades.
Yeah, yeah.
And why it's not in the U.S., I have no idea. But the government is starting to send all the brain injuries from the wars and getting really good improvement with them. It does work, and it's not quackery. I mean, it's accepted medical practices in other countries for decades.
Well, I think it's almost like the issue, there's so many things in medicine that are like that, and that's one of the reasons we're so happy to be speaking to individuals like yourself, because you've had the experience. I mean, we did not rehearse this conversation. This was news to me, but it's fresh and useful news because we've definitely seen it before in our practice, and we've seen people have some dramatic recovery. And yes, we've heard about it with autistic kids, but we're being very careful to say it's not a promise for everybody. But it's actually, I know a woman who was working with HBOT up in Connecticut and was using it for ulcerative colitis, of all things. It actually helped heal that bowel issue that was compromised by an immune system dysregulation, but then the whole bowel healed more effectively and more quickly with that portable HBOT.
It's like I was saying, I think it can help anything with your body, anything. You throw oxygen at something wrong and it's going to improve.
Well, your cells are using it. I mean, it is common sense that if your cells are using it and you're defective in your metabolism and things aren't pumping it to it properly, and we have seen scans, brain scans, repeatedly post HBOT, and they just become suffused. They light right up. And so, yeah, it's a big one. I'll put some links in the show notes on HBOT chambers and so on, and I'll put some links in there for you.
When I was doing it, it was like the fog lifted. It just cleared my mental processing and took me back to, quote, normal. Something else that was incredibly dramatically healing for me was neurofeedback.
Well, let's talk about that because we're going to have some neurofeedback people on soon. Let's talk about, which type of neurofeedback were you using? I mean, could you just tell us a little bit about it?
Well, this was 10 years ago, remember?
Okay.
So there were we tried a lot of different modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, you could only train certain points on your head at any given time. Now I understand you can train the whole head at one time. Put a cap on and do the whole thing. But we would train like certain spots on my motor strip, and I could feel corresponding parts of my body waking up. I very scientifically came to call them the tinglies. We would train certain parts of my motor strip, and I would get the tinglies in my fingers or in my jaw. It was dramatic in helping me learn to speak again. And a large part of the problem with why I couldn't speak is that my jaw wouldn't move. It was kind of locked. Neurofeedback helped open that up.
So let's talk about neurofeedback as a process, because some people who are listening like, what in the heck is neurofeedback? They may have heard about biofeedback where you relax and so on, but let's talk about neurofeedback. You want to tell them a little bit about what your experience was?
Neurofeedback is a kind of biofeedback. It just involves the brain. And it's where a trained practitioner puts electrodes on your head in certain points and reads the electromagnetic waves that your brain is sending energy. And through either an audio or visual feedback system, you train your brain to perform at optimal levels. For instance, she would have a movie going, and when my brain didn't meet the parameters that she set, the movie would stop. But then when my brain would meet it, it would start again. So the learning is subconscious. It's not something, I mean, I remember when I first started, I would sit there and try really hard to change my brain. But it's not like that. It's subconscious. But it's a learning process. And you're permanently changing the way your brain functions. And in my case, it dramatically helped me recover from the brain injury. But I also think it may have helped me to remedy the depression that was there to begin with. You see what I'm saying? By healing my brain injury, I healed all the other things that were wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Just for point of clarification, when she said she was watching, this is all on a computer. So she's sitting in front of a computer. She's got her head wired up to leads. They're not penetrating the skin. They're just put on the outside. And she's breathing deeply and she's watching it. And then they have the program that's coming on the computer designed to read the leads simultaneously while she's looking at the program. And then that winds up changing what's actually going on with her brain waves. So, well, listen, one other thing here we're going to close with this because you have also published an educational memoir, which I think is interesting, and that's called Sex, Suicide, and Serotonin, How These Things Almost Killed and Healed Me. Now, is that a book on Amazon, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, and it's a combination memoir, self-help.
Mm-hmm.
It tells how I got to the place where I wanted to kill myself, and then how I healed myself. And people will be entertained, but they'll also hopefully be educated. And I'm just completely floored by the feedback I'm getting from people. They're saying, this is life-changing. It totally changed the way I think about my life.
You know, it's great. I'm sorry.
I'm pleased to hear that.
Well, you know, it's great. You have such a great attitude, a refreshing personality, and it's so interesting to see how, you know, and when you contribute to the overall conversation in the excellent way you're doing, then people can synchronize with that. I think one of the reasons here at Core Brain Journal we so much enjoy having an individual like you come on and talk about this is because it connects the neuroscience, the advances in neuroplasticity, the different techniques of healing that are taking place with a real person on the street who had some very catastrophic changes that you wonder whether she could ever recover from. And then she's doing really well, and a delightful animated conversation is written now. Is it 2 or 3 books?
2. I'm working on the 3rd.
Okay, good. Okay, so we'll get the 3rd. We'll have you back for the 3rd book sometime down the road. Deb, that'd be great. So listen, we got to wind up. I really appreciate you taking the time. And so you want to give us your website as we close so we can make sure people send over there. We'll have it in the show notes, but let's wind up with where Deb would like you to go.
Sure. It's thebestbrainpossible.com. And you can find me there and on Facebook under the same name.
Thebestbrainpossible.com.
Correct.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Deb. I really appreciate you coming on board, and we'll look forward. Get that 3rd book out, and we'll jump on it. We'll do a little Zoom down to Greensboro. Sounds great.
Sure thing.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss.
Charles.
Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.